everybody, this is Jason Ricci, and I'm here with Bipolar and the Working Musician video part 2. Okay, I decided to make a part 2 because the first video was so successful and I got so much meaningful feedback from it. Some people even used it in a couple of medical fields and showed it to other people that were suffering with bipolar, and I'm really glad it was of some help and maybe helped to raise some kind of awareness. Okay, so just a review of the first video. Please go back and visit that video. I talk about the struggles of coping and accepting that you have a problem, or that I had a problem at all, and then the additional problems of accepting that I would need to take medication for long periods of time or the rest of my life in order to lead a healthy, productive life that included reducing harm to myself and the people around me, okay, and drama and stress too, okay, that kind of stuff. So it's not easy stuff to talk about. It's not easy stuff to live with. It's hard to live with somebody that's bipolar, and it's often hard to be bipolar. And I had a friend who was bipolar, and she used to always say, "Well, you think it's hard out there, think what it's like in here." Okay, I don't know. I don't know which is worse. I think maybe for some of the people on the outside, it could even be worse. So anyway, I'm here to talk to you about sort of what happened since that video. Okay, so you know, in that video again, I talked about the importance of the medication and what it was like, and in particular how that affected music. And you know, nobody in the video I mentioned, you know, nobody likes going on medication that's bipolar. It's not a fun thing to do, and it's very hard to garner and find creative inspiration when you're used to having these, you know, sort of wonderful manic episodes where you're highly productive and creative and inspired. Suddenly going on medication where you feel that middle of the road, where, you know, some people who are bipolar describe that as feeling like a zombie, or, you know, whatever, not happy, not sad, just blah in the middle. And I talked about, you know, using a metronome and, you know, exploring harmony and mathematical and practical ways of approaching music from a more like cerebral standpoint, as a way to muster and re-educate and in general just to continue to produce music. More importantly than all those things, I talked about the decision that it's more important to live than to be a great musician. Okay, that was a hard thing for me, actually, because, you know, I've always identified as, you know, music is who I am. That was always my there's a line in the movie Bird, the Charlie Parker movie, where the psychiatrist says to Chan Parker, Charlie's wife, he says, "Do you want a husband or a musician?" And she says, "They do not separate." Well, I thought that was so cool when I first heard it. I thought that described me right to the T, you know, a typical grandiose bipolar response to that, but also a typical musician response, you know. And over the years, I've come to accept that who I am is what I put into my music, and what my music is what I do. And in this case, it's what I do for a living, and if it wasn't, it would be what I did for a hobby. It's not who I am. Who I am is how I relate, how I treat people. Okay, and that's more important to me now than any kind of musical exploit. And it's, you know, I hope I spend the rest of my life continuing to learn that and value that. After 11 years of pursuing, you know, fame and fortune and money and touring and selling records and booking agencies and record labels and bands and gigs and planes and trains and houses and sex and everything, I hope that I finally kind of sort of reached a bottom with that. Anyway, here's the short story, or it'll probably end up being pretty long. I'm going to make another video after this. The medication stopped working. Okay, guys, and that was really, really hard. It was very ironic. It took me so long to accept that I was bipolar. It took me so long to accept that I needed meds. And then by the time the meds started working, I lasted a couple and a half years, or 2.5 years, until I started testing toxic. And I was poisoning myself with the lithium. In addition to that, You know, the reason I ended up getting tested, which, man, I just recommend you get tested every month if you're on lithium. I wasn't doing that. I wasn't reckless, but I was waiting every 2 months, every 3 months sometimes. I think I even let it go almost 5 months once. Anyway, not cool. By the time I got tested, I was already showing signs of mania and depression again. And that was while I was taking a lot. I think I was taking 1,600 milligrams of lithium a day. That's a lot of lithium. And I was still like starting to behave like I was not medicated. It was a tough pill not to swallow. To say that I'm now going to go off lithium. A lot of bipolar people out there just straight up won't believe me when I say this, but I was very distraught at the idea of approaching this thing without meds. But it was a decision that I made under medical supervision and with doctors and counselors and nurses. I even I tried to commit myself and go at it again in an institution where I could be regulated. My mother was nice. She paid for the thing. It cost a fortune. I don't have health insurance. In that process, we were unable to treat me, and I had a lot of problems, a lot of bad reactions to a lot of drugs. I got out of there with a prescription for Ativan, you know, which all the benzos, the Valium, the Xanax, the Librium, Klonopin, Ativan, which is the one I was on, those are really bad drugs for me because I'm an addict and I'm an alcoholic. And that's primary. I have no chance of treating bipolar disorder if I'm self-medicating. None. Okay? So regardless of what came first, the chicken or the egg, regardless of whether I'm an addict and an alcoholic as a side effect of being bipolar, which, first of all, I don't believe. I think I'm both. I think I showed signs of addiction before I ever showed signs of being BPD. I also showed signs my bipolar disorder really reached a bottom when I was 35. At that time, I was 11 years sober. So you can't blame the drugs and alcohol. Additionally, there's like a lack of support too. A lot of times in the 12-step community, there's very few dual diagnosis groups, and a lot of people, you know, who have been sober a while, unfortunately, some of them will go ahead and tell people that are showing signs of mental illness, like genuine mental illness, that the reason that they are is because they're not working the steps or they don't have a God of their understanding in their life, that kind of thing. So, in other words, they'll say mental illness is symptomatic of being a dry drunk. Okay, that's an incredibly lonely place to be when you're really going at this hard, trying to get better from a medical standpoint and sort of trying to get better from a spiritual and accountable, practical 12-step kind of program way. They just don't sync up all that well sometimes, and it can be lonely. And that's why another reason I'm making this video. So anyway, I got out of that hospital with a prescription of Ativan, 172 of them, and then I was off to the races again. And, I was, abusing and self-medicating. This is about almost a year and a half ago. Had suffered another relapse after doing really well for a while. And, I was honest with my probation officer, and I got clean again, and I've been clean ever since, and it's been phenomenal. But the scariest part of that, of all of it, really, aside from the damage that I did on my last relapse, which was really significant, kidney failure, and I was in the ER for 5 days. I was under Caesar watch. I had an incredibly long and painful withdrawal period. It lasted almost 11 days or more. It was terrible. But one of the really scary things too was going at this BPD without lithium, without Depakote, without Trileptal, without Lamictal, without Abilify, without Wellbutrin, without Seroquel, without all of the drugs that had been tried on me in the past that didn't work or no longer do work. 100% chemical free. Was terrifying. For a long time, that's all I wanted. Now, here it was in my face, and it was really scary. Okay, the first 90 days were horrific because it was impossible to tell the difference between the symptoms of bipolar disorder and the symptoms of early sobriety. The mood swings, the impulsive behavior. All of these things are symptoms of post-acute withdrawal from drugs and alcohol. Okay, sometimes in the first 11 days, physical withdrawal, the depression. You know, it's a wash. It's why it's a really bad idea to diagnose people in treatment in the first even year of sobriety, especially if they haven't been diagnosed before, right? So anyway, it was rough, okay? And right away, I had to go about treating my bipolar disorder in a very similar way that I've had to treat addiction, okay? There was no pill I could take to become sober or to stop the cravings, right? So I had to find a way to incorporate some kind of a program for myself into dealing with bipolar disorder. So, you know, in 12-step programs, there's a fellowship. Well, there is no real fellowship here in Bloomington, Indiana for people suffering with BPD or other types of mental illness. And believe me, I went to what little kinds of resemblances of those things they have, and they weren't there, or they didn't meet regularly, or I was the only one who showed up, that kind of thing. So my immediate group of friends that knew me became my support group. And they've been incredible. My girlfriend Kate, who you know, has seen me go through ups and downs, not only with addiction but with bipolar disorder and in and out of institutions, self-mutilation. She's never witnessed an actual suicide attempt, but I think my last relapse was pretty close to that. Yeah, it's intense. She's been there, so she's able to tell me now when I'm being manic. My other buddy, who I work with on the Harmonica Collective, Winslow Yerxa, has been a dear friend of mine. He's known me for a while, and you know, I think we've only really gotten close the last 4 or 5 years, but he's able to tell, and sometimes he tells me. Now, when somebody tells you that you're being manic and you are bipolar, it's not something you ever want to hear. And I'm frequently defensive, okay? I just know better now than to react, okay? So even though I feel defensive, that doesn't mean I'm not necessarily going to behave defensively. Because in my mind, I just think, well, I'm working really hard, okay? Or I'm just trying to pay the bills. I'm just trying to take care of business. And we're poor, and we need the money, and I need to work, right? And this is what happens. So awareness is the #1 key to recovery. Just like in any kind of a 12-step program, you have to admit you have a problem, okay? Well, I have to admit when I'm in the problem, okay? When I am feeling, for me, mania is first, and it usually lasts a long time, and then small periods of depression that are intense and down. I have no problem identifying depression, okay? I know what that feels like. It's the mania, because, you know, it's not that I feel great. I don't. Lithium was a miracle. It taught me what that middle of the road looks like. You know, in the 12-step program, they often say, you know, a 12-step program of recovery will ruin your ability to enjoy getting drunk or ruin your ability to enjoy getting high. It's true. It really does. That awareness ruins it. Well, also a long period of recovery or a stable period of behavior under the influence of medication will then ruin your manic highs. It no longer feels good anymore. You feel like you're on a roller coaster and you want to get off. So that was the beginning. Okay, I got about a minute left, and I'll take it into the next section and begin telling you what life has been like during this period and how I've been directly treating it after awareness. So I got people in my life that cared about me, people in my life that are willing to be honest with me even though I might be defensive. And I have knowledge that I have this disorder, that I cannot take medication even if I would like to, okay? And that I have to get better, not just for me, but for everybody. Okay, I will see you in part 3 of bipolar disorder and the working musician.